I am the famous American. Let's talk about global warming. Let's talk about climate change. So here's the deal. I will admit, here in the South, where I grew up and still live in the United States, this is the hottest year I've ever lived through. Here we are in October, and I get in my Jeep to drive home, and it's still like 100 degrees. I'm like, so I guess there is something to this whole climate change, global warming thing. Let's talk about why it took me this long to finally think, oh, maybe they're right. I want to tell you why. I think it's important to look at the psychology. It's important as I make this video that you don't perceive this as a debate. No, I want you to understand the psychology of why it's hard for people, especially in the United States, to perceive that perhaps, maybe climate change is a real thing. See, here's the reason. I was walking with my friend to lunch earlier this week, and this is how I started the conversation. I said, you know what? You know me. I'm not a political guy. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. But I have to admit, I think they might be right about this whole climate change thing. And he laughed and said, oh yeah, me too. I'm not political either, but even I admit it. Notice how the conversation started out with disassociating with being political. See, here in the United States, it's a political thing. If you, quote, believe climate change is real, you're a Democrat, you're liberal. If you question it or don't think it's real, then you're a Republican, you're conservative. Since I'm not a political guy, I don't have to automatically fall in one of those camps. But now, I mean, this just isn't normal. And I understand maybe there were other record summers, maybe 100 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, that maybe before we started keeping records, but it was still in the last couple hundred years, because I think what we measure the last 200 years is when modern technology got us to the point where we're starting to, create this hole and the ozone and all that. So I think that's part of it. There's this, it's such a political issue when really it shouldn't be. If we're causing climate change, we shouldn't limit it to just a political issue. And that's the thing, because here's part two of the problem, the perception problem about climate change in the United States. We often associate it with politics, but part two of the problem is, what's the solution? Whenever you try to ask someone, well, what can we do? They're going to give you these errands to go run. They're going to say, well, you need to drive more fuel efficient cars. Okay, yeah, but if you are driving a car already that you own, and now you're going to go buy a new car, you go buy a Prius or whatever it is, well, now you're enabling, or an electric car, whatever, Tesla, whatever brand you need to say here. To make that car, it creates a lot of dirty energy that gets released. So it's not that you're any better off. Now maybe when your current car finally dies and you need a new car, then to buy the electric car, fine. But still no, it still does damage to the environment to actually build and create that electric car. And the energy that you charge that with is not clean energy either. Yes, I'm a big fan of Adam Ruins Everything on Netflix. He's got an episode about this, and he basically debunks a lot of the things that we're supposed to make us feel good. Oh, but if we do these things, it'll be better. No. Another thing he talks about that actually is hurting the environment is how much animal consumption. Now, I don't identify as a vegan anymore, but I largely still am. I mean, I'd say 80% at least of my diet is still vegan. I eat some chicken and some fish, but that's for the most part, that's it. But people are eating more animals. That's a bigger part of their diet, especially in the United States, but now it's picking up on other parts of the world. Just for the fact of all the gas created by those cattle, all the water it takes to feed them and grow their food, that is a major part of what's going on too. But ultimately, how are we going to stop this thing? Are we going to get people to become more vegan than they are? Not strictly, but just become a little more vegan? The car thing, it's not going to solve our problem. If there's a greater demand for electric cars, it's going to do a lot of damage to the atmosphere to create those and to get the energy. So I don't really see how there is going to be a solution on this. I mean, if I knew something individually I could do to actually help, I would do it. Another lame excuse I'm told is, well, you're supposed to write your congressman and tell him. Now, see, for me, I think politicians are the problem. When I think of a politician on either side, I think of a person who is being funded by corporations to make decisions that those corporations want that politician to make. So I distrust politicians. Sting, yes, the singer Sting, in the song "If I Ever Lose My Faith in You," he has a line in there where he says, "I've lost my faith in politicians. They all seem like talk show hosts to me." That's exactly how I do not trust politicians to solve the problem. Now, best case scenario, the United States, stopped eating as much animal products, especially cattle. They were more responsible about driving. See, that's the thing though. In the United States, it's not like parts of Europe where you don't have to have a car. Like in the United, like for me, where I live versus where I work, it's 20 miles. For my wife, it's 40 miles. And we're doing that every day. And it's not like there's a bus that goes and does that. I mean, basically to live in society, this is our life here in the United States. And Adam Ruins Everything. There's also one about this where Adam ruins transportation, where they talk about the United States was not built in a way that was practical for our road system, for us to get around like it is, I'm sure, in Europe. So even if America figured out exactly what we should be doing, what about China? What about Russia? What about the rest of the world? So it kind of feels a little bit like one of these things like, well, let's just all hold hands across the ocean and we're all the same and we'll save the planet. It kind of feels like we're not really going to be able to do this. Because until someone can convince me in simple language, hey, here's what you can actually do that's going to help save the planet. Until someone can tell me that, I'm another skeptic. I'm now finally saying, yeah, I think global warming, climate change, I can see how that's a real thing based on this summer and based on last winter when there hardly was a freeze. I grew up here and that's not how it typically is here in the South. So I can become woke to that. But the way I'm wired, if you present a problem, you got to present a solution. And if you can't provide that solution, I can't be too worried about the problem, because ultimately my mentality is on all things in life, I focus on what I can control, not on what I can't. And right now I'm convinced, I think this global warming thing very well could be real. But what do you want me to do about it? Honestly, what can I do as an individual? If there's something I can actually do in reality, in American economy and culture, where I am in the United States, and I can easily broadcast that message, I'll do it. See, one of my things that I always like to say is, good communicators are able to take a complicated message and make it simple for everyone else. Meanwhile, poor communicators can take a simple message and make it complicated for everybody else. I'm a good communicator. Tell me the answer and I'll start communicating if it's that simple. But ultimately, if we're going to have to completely redesign American economy and culture, okay, so what, we start working from home now, we don't drive cars anymore, and everyone hardly ever eats meat again, which again, not a problem for me, but doing all these things. So now we're doing our part, and then we have to depend on the rest of the world to do their part. Can we even save it? Can we save the planet in time? Because already, if it's true and the ice caps are melting and there's going to be water rising and all this stuff, is it going to be too little too late? I'm not the kind of person who can worry about things that I have no control over or that inevitable, like death, for example. It would be pretty silly to be worried about that all the time. Ultimately, you have to have a plan. Okay, here's what I believe is going to happen after I die. Either you have faith or you don't, or whatever it is that you do. We're all going to die at some point. We live our life knowing that, and to some degree, you have to be prepared for that to happen any day. Obviously, the earth has an expiration date as well. But is there really anything I can do to slow it down? Honestly. And is there anything that I can send that message to help other people? So far, I haven't been convinced that there is. But I'm open-minded. You could change my perspective by leaving a comment right here.